Imagine a quiet Quaker woman living out her retirement in a small home, yet all the while haunted by a question that still echoes through history, namely, how deep were her ties to the assassination of President Kennedy? Let's meet the enigmatic Ruth Paine here on Things Visible and Invisible. Max Good is an American documentary filmmaker whose filmmaking often focuses on marginal or indeed provocative characters. His most recent work is The Assassination and Mrs. Paine, a documentary about Ruth Paine's controversial ties to the JFK assassination. And he joins me down the line from his home in California. Max, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Max, when I first came across your work, I have to say that I was intrigued by it, but also a little bit sort of confused. I have read a lot about the JFK assassination. I have watched endless amount of documentaries about it, and yet the name Ruth Paine was new to me. When did you first come upon her and her possible links to the JFK assassination?
Well, I've had an interest in the JFK assassination for 20 years or so, but in 2008 I read a book called JFK and the Unspeakable, and that's the first place I ever came across Ruth and Michael Paine, her husband, and I was shocked that this was a whole new angle on the assassination that I didn't know about. And Ruth Paine was the person who Marina Oswald was living with at the time of the assassination. Lee Harvey Oswald would spend the weekends there, and they only lived with Ruth for a few months and only knew her for 9 months, but they were very close. And her house was the place that all the Oswalds' belongings were stored, and the alleged murder rifle, excuse me, and the alleged murder rifle was supposedly stored in their garage in a blanket on the floor. And Oswald spent the night before the assassination at Ruth Paine's house, and the official story is that he got the rifle from the garage, took it to work, and killed Kennedy. So much of the incriminating evidence against Oswald was found at Ruth Paine's house. And Ruth Paine also had an instrumental role in getting Oswald the job at the Texas School Book Depository, where he allegedly shot JFK. So she's a very important witness in the JFK assassination story. In fact, she was asked more questions by the Warren Commission than any other witness. So she may seem like an obscure character, but really she's quite central.
Absolutely. And we're going to unpack all of that, Max. Your film has done a very intriguing job at setting some of this out. But I think we better start at the beginning because there was a history to Ruth Paine before Dallas, the events of Dallas 1963. So who was she? Where did she come from? And what was her background?
Well, Ruth Paine was born in New York City, but grew up in Ohio. Her father was an insurance executive who also worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development. And her parents were sort of liberal socialists, but very fierce anti-communists. And Ruth married Michael Paine, who was a member of the famous Forbes family, a very prominent family in New England. And the two of them seemed to be liberals, kind of Unitarian Quakers. Ruth became a Quaker, and they seem to express anti-war, pacifist kind of views. And for some reason, they moved to Dallas. I guess Michael got a job at Bell Helicopter, a major military contractor. And in fact, Michael's father-in-law had done the most important work in developing a commercial helicopter technology. So he had sold that to Bell Helicopter, and so Michael was able to get a job there. His father-in-law was named Arthur Young. He's pretty famous. The helicopter design he worked on, one of those helicopters actually in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. But so the Paines, Ruth and Michael Paine, are sort of a very sophisticated, educated couple. Michael attended Harvard, and most of his ancestors attended Harvard. He didn't graduate, and they're pretty well off. Michael had a trust fund, yet they moved to this working class suburb of Dallas, Irving, Texas, and somehow they were introduced to Marina and Lee Harvey Oswald at a party.
Well, yeah. just before we get to that, because sure. Already, Max, just in the brief outline of the Paines and their move to Texas, there already seems to be a sort of disconnect, or am I imagining too much into this? I mean, you've got, as you say, very educated, very sophisticated East Coast people, who presumably could have gone anywhere in terms of occupation or jobs or the access to various opportunities. And yet, as you say, they end up in Dallas, in a working class district in Dallas. No offense to Dallas or Texas, but I mean, was the job at the helicopter firm, was it that good that her husband had to take it? I mean, was it something that he really felt that passionate about?
Well, it does seem a little incongruous. Michael had a trust fund that today would be, millions of dollars. This is the, only one we know about. He had a trust fund of maybe about $300,000 in 1963, and at the time, they lived in a house that cost $5,000. So also, it's odd for this sophisticated kind of liberal couple to move to really the most vehement right-wing city in America at the time, Dallas. It does seem a little odd. Michael's job at Bell Helicopter, I can't say whether he had other options or what, but it does seem a little strange that somebody who expressed pacifist views was working at a military contractor. And Bell Helicopter made the famous UH-1 Huey helicopter, which was used in the Vietnam War. And he even had a security clearance in his job there. So he also, it's a strange character. It doesn't all add up.
And at the same time, Max, I don't know if this was current at the time, but that the Paines had moved to Dallas. But Ruth's sister was also in a very interesting occupation.
Yeah, so the Paine family has several connections to the CIA, the intelligence community, and the government, which has been, one of the main reasons people are suspicious about their role in the assassination. And I should just make it clear that some people, in fact, many people on the conspiracy side of things, suspect that the Paines had some role in babysitting Oswald or keeping track of him, or maybe helping to frame him as a patsy. There are different views on exactly what they might have done.
Absolutely, and we're going to get into that. But I mean, the picture you're painting, Max, of the Paines in 1963 Dallas, as you say, there's a disconnect there. The other fact, which always makes me scratch my head, is that Ruth Paine was fluent in Russian as well.
Ruth started studying Russian when she was pretty young. I think in college or her 20s, and she was fairly proficient. She actually taught Russian to teenagers in Dallas at the time of the assassination. So that was one of the reasons she gave for wanting to bring Marina Oswald to live with her, that she could work on her Russian. But yeah, Ruth's ability to speak Russian and her family intelligence ties do make people wonder whether she might have been some sort of intelligence asset. And like you said, her sister it's confirmed that her sister did work for the CIA for a time. She also worked for the Air Force, and that's verified with documents that have come out over the years.
So we have by 1963, we have a wealthy couple, independently wealthy couple, who decide to relocate to Texas, to a working class area in Dallas, where they're this very sophisticated couple then proceed to take in lodgers. Talk me through that.
Well, so the story is that the Paines attended a party in Dallas in February of 1963, and this was put on by some of their friends, people who Michael knew through Bell Helicopter and the various activities in Dallas. And at this party, there was another suspicious character by the name of George de Mohrenschildt, who is a very important character to understand in the assassination. At this time, he was Oswald's best friend in Dallas. And de Mohrenschildt also is a confirmed, admitted CIA informant. He had a relationship with the CIA, and for some reason, he's friends with Oswald. He's what they called a white Russian. He was one of the Russian elites who fled Russia, who was they were more loyal to the Tsar, and so he also had a kind of strong anti-communist point of view. And why he befriends Lee Harvey Oswald when Oswald moves to Dallas. Of course, people need to know that Lee Harvey Oswald defected to the Soviet Union. If you don't know about the story, he defected to the Soviet Union as a young man, saying he was a communist and he wanted to live there. And then he comes back to the U.S. and ends up living in Dallas. So many people suspect that he was actually sent to the Soviet Union as some sort of asset or spy, or dangling him for the KGB to approach him or something. And so he ends up back in Dallas, friends with this guy, George de Mohrenschildt, a CIA informant. And then at this party, Ruth Paine meets Marina and Lee through George de Mohrenschildt, who brings Lee Harvey Oswald to this party. So, yeah, very intriguing connections here, very intriguing chain of events, how Ruth Paine eventually kind of becomes the caretaker of the Oswalds. I mean, she's almost kind of aggressive about inviting Marina Oswald to come live with her rent-free, and she takes Marina to all her, hospital appointments. Marina's pregnant at the time. Uh, Ruth is right in the middle of the Oswald's life. All their belongings are stored in her garage. When they moved to New Orleans for a time, and Ruth actually went and picked them up there and brought all their stuff back to Dallas to stay with her. So,
Well,
yeah.
I don't know about you, Max, but I don't know, and I haven't encountered many people at a party who very quickly then insist that I come and live with them, and then become almost my carer, for a better expression, who are constantly with me at hospital appointments or whatever I'm doing, who then also travel many hundreds of miles across states to pick people up and bring them back to the city that they have left. I mean, again, am I reading too much into this? This looks, there's something not only enigmatic about this, but almost something suspicious about the whole thing.
Yes, there's definitely something suspicious, and that's why people have been writing and theorizing and researching the Paines for the last 60 years. And it's a niche of the JFK assassination research world. The Paines are known to every researcher who's spent much time on this, and they often, people suspect that Ruth and Michael may have been a job they were assigned to look after the Oswalds, and it's certainly a possibility. People who defend the official story usually completely dismiss this as a wacko conspiracy theory. You just weigh out no evidence, and that people are attacking, defaming this innocent Quaker woman who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But there's a lot of concrete research, and I tried to put that into my film rather than the speculation and the rumor, but to look at what the actual facts are and why people might suspect the Paines were more than they seemed. Well, I was sad to hear Ruth passed earlier this year. She was an extremely intelligent and strong woman, and she was willing to talk to anybody about the assassination. She put up with many conspiracy theorists, conspiracy researchers who contacted her. Some were not as polite as others, people who suspected she had some nefarious role. So I had a lot of respect for Ruth. After I read about Ruth in this book in 2008, I somehow found out that she lived only an hour away from me in Northern California in a retirement home. So I thought somebody needs to get to the bottom of this story. I mean, here we are, people are suspicious that this woman might have had a role in helping to set up Oswald as a patsy, and she's still alive. We can still ask her questions. So it was something I thought maybe I could make a film out of this, and I found the phone number of the retirement home and called, and she was surprisingly open to talking to me. Only later I found out that she had done many interviews over the years and talked to many researchers. But she was very open, and I ended up making a film over the course of 6 or 7 years with her, and interviewed her several times. And she was always a little hard to was hard to get her to be vulnerable on camera. She had done so many interviews, and she had her story down. It was hard to get any real emotion or new kind of angle from her. But I started to push her more and more with the difficult questions over the course of the time I was filming with her. And eventually I put some of the most serious accusations and questions to her, and forced her to answer those questions.
Okay.
So,
well, we'll get to that in a bit more detail. But for anybody who's catching up, we had the first part where we gave the preamble, I guess, to the events of the Kennedy assassination. Let's focus a little bit more now on the narrative from she's befriended the Oswalds. The Oswalds had gone to New Orleans and then they'd returned to Dallas. Talk us through a little bit from Ruth Paine's involvement with that. First of all, the question, at this point, were Lee and Marina once more reconciled? Were they living again together?
Well, Lee and Marina were somewhat separated. Lee rented a rooming house in Dallas, but this was more for him so he could get to his job or find work in Dallas, while Marina lived out further in the suburbs with Ruth. And Lee would come spend the weekend there at Ruth's with Marina. And so basically the Oswalds stayed with Ruth for a couple months before the assassination. And, at the time, Oswald didn't have a job, and Ruth somehow helped find him the job at the Texas School Book Depository. It was the story is that they were having coffee with a neighbor, and they asked the neighbor if they knew some places to find some work, and they said they gave a few places they could call, and one of them was the book depository. And Ruth actually made the call to the book depository to ask if they had some positions for Lee Harvey Oswald. And he did end up getting that job in a fateful location.
Absolutely. And for anybody who's followed the JFK assassination, that building is central to it. So not only is she all the things we said in the first part, i.e. somebody from a very educated and cultured background who happens to speak Russian and has links to the CIA, etc., through her family. But she's now managed to find Lee Harvey Oswald work in this book depository. The events of November 22nd, we know. What were her sort of movements? What was her reaction to what unfolded with the Oswalds and Kennedy?
Well, on the day of November 22nd, 1963, Ruth was with Marina, and they were actually, watching TV and spending the day together. And they got word of the assassination. They say that they didn't suspect Oswald or anything, but there's a suspicious report about a phone conversation between Michael and her husband, who was working at Bell Helicopter that day. Somebody was listening in on their conversation, and the conversation went something like, we know Lee Harvey Oswald did it, but he's not the one responsible. We both know who is responsible. So this is a report on a phone conversation between them that was intercepted by the authorities.
Presuming, Max, that you put it to Ruth when you interviewed her, you put that conversation to her, and if so, what was her reaction?
That was one of the few times that Ruth didn't give me an explanation. She just said, "That's garbage," that's pure garbage, and didn't really have much to say about it. She later admitted, yes, there was some conversation like that, but that they thought it was the right wing in Dallas who had killed Oswald. The timing of that conversation is also very controversial, because it's possible that the timing of it would make it so that this phone call happened before Oswald was even reported as a suspect in the media. So they would have had to have deduced that for themselves.
Or playing the devil's advocate, they would have had to have some other information.
So eventually the police came to the Paine home that day, and there was a dramatic scene where they came in and asked if Lee had any weapons, and Ruth said no, but Ruth is translating for Marina. Marina barely speaks English, supposedly, and Marina said, "Oh, yes, he did have a rifle. It's in the garage." And the police and Ruth and Marina go into the garage to find this rifle, and it's not there. The blanket is empty. This is a story that Ruth has told in almost every interview she's done. So then the Paine home kind of became
just on that, Max. I mean, just on that. I mean, I'm trying to work out how big the Paine house was, or the house and garage together. I'm assuming it wasn't that extensive. I mean, do you think it's possible that a part-time lodger who was Lee Harvey Oswald could stash a gun there that Ruth Paine would not come across in the normal run of her household duties?
I suppose it's possible. It does seem unlikely that the whole story, that the gun was supposedly stored in a blanket that was just laying on the ground of the garage. And Michael Paine even admitted to picking up this blanket and handling it. And his story was that he thought it was camping equipment or something. He didn't think it was a rifle. Yes, it's very odd, the story with the rifle.
Maybe I'm being a bit too suspicious as well, Max, but there's something of a sort of almost performative nature with the police turning up, asking if Oswald has any weapons, and Ruth conveniently, or with Marina, heading to the garage to find what would have been a rifle, but it just happens to have been gone. You know, I mean, it's it feels almost like a scene in a film that you could have scripted, right?
Sure, it does, and that's one reason this story gets told over and over again. It's a dramatic scene which supposedly points to Oswald's guilt, and there are other scenes like this. There's one about Oswald supposedly left his wedding ring in a little teacup on the nightstand, you know, that day, and people think, though, that's because he knew he was going to either be killed or arrested after assassinating JFK. I think it's good to question all of these things, and many people have done so over the years.
What was Ruth Paine's view of Oswald subsequent to this? You know, that the many interviews she did, the testimonies she gave. I mean, did she subscribe to the lone gunman theory?
Yes, Ruth Paine has always subscribed to the lone gunman theory, and has been pretty vehement about Oswald's guilt, and used her own centrality to the story to support that. She says, I was there. I saw him. I knew him. He was guilty. There was no conspiracy. She's always maintained that, and she has very little tolerance for entertaining the questions about Oswald's guilt. She pretty much completely dismisses the idea of a conspiracy. And that's always been a sticking point because she seems a bit fanatical in her perspective. You'd think she'd be open, as a extremely intelligent person, you'd think she'd be open to at least considering different possibilities. And she's quite well informed on the assassination. She's read many books. She's a bit of an expert herself.
Well, I mean, the picture you painted, which is all factual, which is her befriending of the Oswalds, Marina in particular, one would have thought there would have been an element of disbelief in the, that Oswald could have done this, almost like not wanting to believe it because of her friendship with Marina and Oswald, and also being dragged into it herself inadvertently. The opposite, where she's cast iron in her view that Oswald carried it out and that's it. It doesn't seem to sort of connect with the normal run of things, where if your friend is in difficulties, you tend to be disbelieving until you're confronted with the absolute facts.
Yeah, well, at least after the assassination, Ruth seemed to be, she seemed to usually, when Ruth talked about Oswald, she would say that she didn't really like him. She didn't really get along with him. She never really had much good to say about Oswald after the assassination. Who knows what their relationship was like prior, but she definitely didn't seem to support him. In fact, when he was in jail, he called their house and talked to Ruth and asked Ruth to call a lawyer for him, a famous lawyer in New York. And Ruth seemed to be resentful that he was even asking anything of her at this point. And she never got into contact with that lawyer for him. Of course, he was killed, 2 days after the assassination himself.
That's right. I mean, it seems that, I'm trying to work this out. I mean, Ruth's interests seem to have been Marina. And I'm not quite sure what the interest was there. Was it a way to get to Oswald, or was it something else which has got nothing to do with Oswald? What sort of conclusions did you come to, Max?
Well, yeah, Ruth's main interest was Marina, in supposedly helping Marina and having somebody to keep her company at the house. I should have mentioned earlier that just before this time of 1963, that Ruth and her husband Michael Paine had separated, and Michael Paine was living somewhere else. So this conveniently, if you want to see it that way, this opened up more space in the house, and Marina Oswald and her children were able to live there too. It was a very, very small house, a very small 2-bedroom, modest house. Ruth had 2 children, and Marina had 1, and then had another. So it was quite a full house. Ruth even later admitted in a magazine interview that when Oswald was killed, it was a relief for her, that she said, "Oh, at least there won't have to be a trial, and Marina won't have to go to trial." Michael Paine did spend some time with Lee Harvey Oswald, and strangely, they were going to left-wing and right-wing meetings together. They would go to ACLU meetings or John Birch Society type meetings. And this is admitted by Michael Paine. And Michael said that Oswald's reasoning for this was he said he was spying on these meetings. So take of that what you will.
Unfortunately, Max, we are coming to the end of our time together, and I think what you've done is intrigued certainly me and the audience enough to go and watch your film, because the more we talk about Ruth Paine and her involvement with the Oswalds and the events of Dallas, November 1963, I think the more questions come to mind, the more question marks arise in my mind anyway. So for now, could you tell people where they can find out more about you, the work you're involved in, and also where they can watch your fascinating film?
All right. Thanks for having me on. If people want to see the film, you can watch it. You can rent it on Apple or Amazon or YouTube. And you can go to the film's website if you want to order a DVD or see other stuff. It's www.jfkpaine.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at jfkpaine.
And just give us the name of your movie again.
The movie is The Assassination and Mrs. Paine.
Well worth a view. For now, Max, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.